on the Middle East, Israel's prime minister said this morning that he spoke to President Trump 3 times in recent days, and they discussed Iran and they discussed a peace plan. Do you know what the content of those conversations was?
No, and if I did, I wouldn't discuss them here because that has to be navigated very carefully.
Well, one of the reasons I ask is we do have this mid-November deadline that the State Department and the Pentagon have set for Israel to improve the flow of aid to Gaza's 2 million residents. The UN says there is famine already or on the verge of famine. If it is found that Israel is indeed violating U.S. law, would you hold them accountable? Should there be consequences because they are recipients of U.S. aid?
Well, I've had huge disagreements with this administration in terms of how they've administered their entire policy.
But this is U.S. law. It's not just this administration. Yeah.
Well,
it's humanitarian law.
I think what we've seen just break out again in the past 70-plus hours since President Trump won the election, Hamas is now looking for total peace. So I think the environment has totally changed.
What do you mean?
No, they've announced they'd like to see peace. They'd like to see peace in Gaza. Let's see where that leads.
You believe that there will be a hostage deal negotiated under President Trump?
I'd like to see what Hamas means by this statement, but it seems that the entire environment is shifting right now because they see new leadership coming in, and I'm encouraged by that, and I think we'll have new opportunities to. Again, President Trump was able to deliver peace through strength. I think that's on the way, and I'm optimistic what it might lead to.
So one of the interesting dynamics we saw in this election was that Mr. Trump was able to, in some ways, successfully campaign and peel off Muslim voters, Arab voters. Certainly in the state of Michigan, you saw some of that. Do you think, and they were frustrated by the carnage in Gaza. As a result, do you think Mr. Trump ends up with more wiggle room here to perhaps hold the Israeli prime minister to account, or does he just give a green light?
I think what President Trump is going to do is focus on the root cause, to borrow a term that was used a great deal in the last administration. He's going to focus on Iran, because the cause of this is the Iranian funding and training of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of the Houthis. That would have never happened,
but in terms of
except for the fact that they released the enforcement of sanctions on Iran.
International law and U.S. legal standards to recipients of U.S. military aid. Do you think he will stick by that?
President Trump is certainly going to uphold U.S. law, but he's also going to make certain that our allies are properly cared for and that our adversaries are dealt with accordingly.
So I don't have to tell you this because you know Asia really well, but 5 of America's 7 treaty commitments are in that Asia Pacific. The U.S. has exposure there in a tremendous way. The last time Donald Trump was president, he talked about pulling U.S. troops out of Japan, pulling them out of South Korea. Is that a priority now, reducing the military footprint in Asia?
I think that comes back again to the failure of the elite here in Washington, Margaret, to understand how a business person negotiates. Everybody's got to sit down and talk about what the options are. We have been supporting military presence in that area ever since World War II, ever since the Korean War. A significant investment on behalf of the American people. Those investments were made at a time when these economies were collapsed. They were developing countries. Today, they are fully developed countries. It's entirely relevant and I think appropriate for President Trump to discuss with him the level of support.
Saying we might ditch our allies isn't exactly a positive message, right?
I think the message should be that our allies can and should step up to the extent possible to strengthen their own capabilities. We're seeing it happen. We're seeing it happen in Japan. They've agreed to double their defense budget from 1% to 2% of GDP. That's a positive development. They're trying to work more closely with us. I think in President Trump's administration, they definitely will. This is the direction that we need to go. Same for South Korea.
Before I let you go, you are on a number of powerful Senate committees. Do you think you're more useful to Mr. Trump in the Senate, or would you join his cabinet if asked?
I'll just say this. I was privileged to have a tremendous career in business, but one of the greatest honors in my life was to represent the United States, the greatest country in the world, in President Trump's administration overseas. It's also been one of the greatest honors in my life to represent the people of Tennessee, serving the United States Senate. And whatever role I hold going forward, it's going to be advancing the positions that President Trump has articulated that the American people overwhelmingly supported. And I'll do that in whatever role necessary, but we are going to see America strong again.
Senator Hagerty, thank you for your time.